This is the EnT podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Manapuisk in St. John, New Brunswick, which is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik Maliseet people. Hello, good evening, might be good morning. All things are possible with the asynchronous delivery of episode 33 of the EnT podcast. With us, we're doing this as a second. We're doing a redo. We've done at least one previous redo. I think it was just once prior to this one. Isn't that right, Doug?
Yep, just the one.
Yeah, so for various reasons, the affordances, if you will, of our format are such that we can sort of preserve certain technical aspects of it, including some of the writing or images and such. But it's sometimes just prudent to go for an optimal experience when the technology is just so against you, which I think is probably keeping, I think, with today's topic anyway. And of course, Dr. Doug Reed, Dr. Matt Stranick, in case somehow you're just catching this for the first time. So Doug, why don't you tell us what we're talking about today, please?
Okay, we're going to go into technology and innovative creation, how far we have come. And I find it amusing that we're doing a technology wrap up and we're trying a whole new technology infrastructure. So that just is kind of par for the course, I guess, with how we do things.
I would tend to agree. Yeah. How are you finding the StreamYard interface so far, pal?
So far so good. No problem at all.
It's funny. I don't know if you've experienced this because of our communication through Facebook Messenger or whatever. But with Dan so I just finished recording about an hour-long music podcast, and that was sort of my testing for this one, if you will, because I did promise Doug I would actually try the thing before I, ventured into having an unusable experience. So kudos to beta testing and instructional design processes, as in fits with the technology bent of the program. But it was a seamless experience, I got to say. And now just shifting on to this format, right? So far, the wheels haven't fallen off. But I think, it's a year basically since the episode started rolling out. The conceptual kind of stuff had been kind of tried out a little bit prior to the summer, but as I discussed in the previous podcast, as a matter of fact, apparently I was told this weekend has actually been the official start of fall. Isn't that so?
Yeah. Yep.
So hence the vernal equinox. Yes. You say equinox, I say equinox. Let's call the whole thing off.
Yeah.
So why don't you go to that first reference there, pal, unless you want to mention anything further about why this is significant or of interest now, besides what we've already kind of discussed?
More than anything, I wanted to touch base just to see, because it's the Ed Non-Tech podcast, but technology is at the base of it. And when the technology fails, or when technology is not up to the task, then we end up with less than what we wanted and less than what we could have got.
Well,
So,
and as per this format, I mean, this is your first real significant foray into this. This is my first significant foray into this. And as per the previous recording, we discussed on how we're both looking at potentially branching out now and trying podcasting in other capacities, which I think is cool. You know, you have a safe sort of process kind of built up here with 33 episodes now, plus a couple of episodes that were redone. So really, it's, you know, in terms of content that's kept in the background, there's a whole buildup of stuff there, which I think it might be fun to mash up into some kind of Frankenstein way sometime. Given the Halloween, maybe it's just like I'm going to chop up a bunch of stuff that hasn't been out yet and remix it and Frankenstein it. Potentially Halloween
sounds
and whatnot
cool.
being around the corner or some such. So why don't we? I got the thing up here. Why don't we, if you want to get started here, you got Alan. We were talking about Alan podcasting and education, 2012. So this is some time before StreamYard or some of these other things. What did you make of that reading there,
pal? The reason I chose this one, because it's talking about how it was initially, podcasting was considered a niche medium for audio blogging, and now the influence is profound. So this was 6 years after podcasting really started, because my first research-based podcast was in 2006. And so 6 years later, they're talking about the profound impact. And it's in 2023, they had no clue what profound impact was. Because now, if that was a wave on the ocean, now that's a tsunami that's hit now.
It's almost a de facto mainstream thing where you're almost at a disadvantage in some respects as a practitioner if you're not taking advantage of that, or at least seeing that it can be put to use in terms of a teaching aspect, which we both have been involved in, right? We both, I think, had the opportunity to sort of either implement it or be around closely where it was being implemented in our respective areas. I don't mean to say things about your career if that didn't happen to be true, but I mean, that's kind of how my thing has started to play out a little bit. So yeah, it's current, it's contemporary, it's I would almost say almost its own paradigm shift in its way, because you've had the ability to put up elements, you know, static elements of sound for, you know, since basically internet developed any media capacity beyond message boards. So it's like it just became such a mainstream format. Like, do you read audiobooks, Dan? Doug, I almost called you Dan. I'm sorry. Audiobooks. Are you like into that? Is that on your thing, your diet?
Yeah, but I don't pay for them.
Okay.
Like, is it LibriVox? There's one where people volunteer to read classic stories that are out of copyright, and then those audio recordings go up. So some sound better than others.
That's cool.
If that
that's
makes
really
sense.
cool, actually.
So if I'm, so going on a long trip, that's where like I've listened to so many like Jules Verne and like Edgar Rice Burroughs and all that kind of stuff that's from 100
nifty,
years ago.
Man. I wouldn't debunk it. That's pretty dope. So like what so when you're driving, do you listen to this stuff at all, or is like you a radio music kind of person when you drive?
I had a job. I was living in just outside Edmonton, and I was working in Calgary. And so once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever, I would head down and I would just load up some LibriVox stuff on my phone and then listen to it the whole way there. And it was nice to have that story rather than, okay, let's change radio stations. What's the next radio station? And can I listen to another 80s radio station?
Cool.
If you ever get to PEI, there's like 7 radio stations and 5 of them are 80s. And there's one that's 80s and 90s, but it just seems like all these songs from when I was a kid. That's all they seem to play. So I
Well,
need
I
the
feel like I'm
podcast.
gonna. I feel like I'm gonna end up by de facto going to PEI like within the next 6 months, at least once to Charlottetown and then vicinity, if nothing else, just because it's actually a happening little island you got going on there in certain respects. So the birthplace of Canadian Confederation, such as that, is anything, right, in its own way. Um, my mom, she's just like my mom. First of all, my mom is like a voracious consumer of audiobooks. So like when she's driving,
Mhm.
which is like a lot, she can't countenance the sound of music in her home or in her car, but she's always playing audiobooks in addition to reading books, like
Oh,
just
for sure. Yeah.
analog or digital books. And speaking of affordances, man, just in terms of the digital books, how grateful am I as I get older and my eyesight begins to kind of wane or my reaction might be a little bit off. Those customizable settings on tablets and e-readers, I can see like as of why older folks would sort of gravitate towards those as a kind of way
Oh,
of
yeah.
accessing stuff. None of which has anything to do particularly with what you were speaking to there, pal. Honestly, but
No, but
that's all.
well, way back
Yep.
when, podcasts were personal on-demand casts. That's what the
Yep.
pod stood for.
Oh, is
And
that
the
really?
technology wasn't, yeah. So the technology wasn't there, right? Like
Okay.
my flip phone did not have audio capability to play a pile of
Oh,
stuff.
I would
So
love to record a podcast episode now using contemporary flip phone technology. Like
yeah,
both of these, users at both ends, or that would be just like a step above, like a walkie-talkie or CB radio kind of setup. Sorry,
yeah,
dude.
yeah.
That's what.
And no, that's okay. Because do you remember Walkman? We did. I never had one. The rich
Oh
kids had them,
man,
or the Discman.
man. I'll tell you what. I spent so many teenage years because I never learned to drive. Right, Doug? You probably learned to
Mhm.
drive like right when you could, like as soon as you had the ability to. You were behind the wheel of the car, right?
Yeah, but I didn't get my license till for another year after that.
Psh, okay, I'm
So I
speaking
was
as a
17.
45-year-old man who doesn't drive, never has. So I spent a lot of time walking around, like, because I literally gotta go to work, So Discman, friggin' Walkman,
Hmm.
cassette, CD, MP3. You see me walking around. I'm getting with the future. I got wireless set now. I spend so many friggin' hours just because I have to get myself from one location to another, physically. So the music is always
Yeah,
there within the background. And I just, for that reason, I have a hard time embracing verbal kind of formats because it would interfere with the, flow of my own thoughts vis-a-vis verbal stuff. So if you want to sort
right.
of speak to everybody, everybody's got their own personalized, optimal learning environments or whatnot, right? So, um,
Yeah, and so
anyways, pal,
you focus
yeah,
that on your personal needs and wants and what works best for you. And
correctly so. Yeah.
I have more of a mix. Like sometimes I
Yes,
just want to
you
zone
got a
out and listen to
diverse.
music,
Yep.
and sometimes I want to listen to something funny, and sometimes I want to listen to something informative. Sometimes I want to listen to something about how to deal with anxiety or how to be happier or
No, that's
whatever.
exactly. And what you're talking about is like you can find very specific, helpful resources on any number of topics. And I think, there's
Yes.
a lot of value to be had within the OER kind of circumstances. Because, like, in my post secondary thing prior to now, I was vaguely interested in OER, particularly like, vis a vis things like, well, besides WordPress websites and the like, but like,
Yeah.
The H5P stuff, I remain very interested in that. So the idea for me to be able to kind of develop that outside the practice of, just sort of post-secondary learning institutions as such is sort of a tempting possibility now within the kind of work that I'm doing, being able to at least potentially use those really user-friendly tools, and with those easy drag and drop, upload, publish kind of interfaces that go along with those tools that and putting them into workplace based learning, just in time learning, with some interactions potentially there. So I guess that sort of leads to, Doug, I mean, you had kind of envisioned, I think, at one point, and it comes through in the notes that you prepared, you were interested somewhat in a how-to, a technical discussion a bit of podcasting, or was that something you prefer to move past at this point?
No, that's what I'd hope to get to. But what you just described ties in really nice and with Gunderson and Cummings, the 2023 podcasting in higher ed as a component of universal design for learning. Because
UDL
everybody has their own approach.
Yes.
And how to get there, and how do we deliver content? What is the content, and how do we make sure that we strategize what we're doing to use our time the best ways? So you just described that perfectly. That was really nice.
Well, I'm glad, because just in terms of my work practice, it's something that as I'm having the opportunity now to kind of literally, I'm pretty close. So I don't think I'm disclosing any secrets or trade craft by saying I'm at sort of the process of being pretty close to actually kind of rolling up the sleeves and actually doing some, tangible e-learning development vis-a-vis broadly an LMS, and for some pretty well-defined learning objectives. So UDL has been kind of on my mind in terms of that, because really people, because, that speaks a lot for online stuff in terms of a interface that is easy to get to or through, reduce the number of clicks, make it optimal from a sensory perspective, make it customizable, use current, practical, operating efficiencies and standards, making sure that it functions well on mobile. I would almost say that that's like a top 3 consideration, making this stuff accessible through mobile, and which is sort of what I appreciate. One of the things I appreciate about WordPress is that it does a great job just with the themes associated, the various, there's literally, I'm not being facetious to say, thousands of themes within the friggin' WordPress sort of thing if you want to go searching for them and downloading them and whatnot. And the ones that are current, right, the ones that are currently updated, and you can see what that record is before you download it, how often and when it was last updated. If it's updated frequently and it's current, you can bet that it's going to work well on mobile for the most part. So that's something. It's like, kind of, and then you can take some very easy, sensible steps using UDL practical guidelines just by going to their website and consulting some of their links to, run some tests, get some automated tools to sort of check your content and whatnot. And there's a lot of, I think, stuff built into current LMS that is, I think, conducive to that. There's like the web accessibility standards, which I think I need to actually look at before I speak any further on this and expose my gaps of knowledge, because now I'm getting very close to the edge of that and probably went over it a little while ago in terms of my actual knowledge of it, except to recognize that it is important and it's going to warrant some further investigation and use on my part. So anyway, man.
And one thing we get to do that really leverages our freedom and flexibility is we're not tied to an LMS, right? Like
in your particular situation, you mean your particular work context.
You're comfortable with WordPress, so we're using WordPress, right? And I like WordPress, but I've never gone to the lengths you have with it.
Well, and the nice thing about it, though,
as soon as you talk about mobile.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, man.
No, I was.
Nothing will
I was just. Go ahead. I was just going to say that since we're not tied to an LMS, and a lot of Universal Design for Learning talks about LMS kind of stuff, with WordPress and the decisions we've made, it is mobile friendly. It is friendly for cell phones in a way that LMSs are not, right? Because you can use a mobile device with an LMS, but those interfaces are horrific, less than fun, seem to be designed by engineers for engineers. The end
Suboptimal.
user sometimes gets left out. Yeah, suboptimal. So I just love the way we've leaned into the UDL stuff, and we're trying to make this accessible as possible. That's why we have the video option, we have the audio option. You get the audio all over the place. We've got our different sets of notes, and we've got the multimedia that we put together with our images and our little animated GIFs and all that stuff. And hopefully something will trigger to be helpful for somebody, right? Like I'm trying to cast a wide net to give everybody an opportunity to find success with this.
Well, and funny you mentioned the word cast, because I think I just want to, before I go any further, but that's cast. I'm typing something into my web browser and just
okay.
yeah, the UDL guidelines. It's literally cast.org, cast.org, and if you put that into your browser, as I just did, it actually redirects to udlguidelines.cast.org, because CAST, C-A-S-T, is this sort of learning provider which has done a lot of work, I guess, definitively on the UDL framework. So I was just going to throw in with the, when you said cast a wide net, I was like, ed tech joke, but anyway.
I didn't realize that, but I'll take it. That makes me sound funnier than I am. So that's a win.
Yeah.
And I do like when organizations and people get together and agree on standards. I love it.
Yeah.
Because
making stuff more like interoperable. It's like,
well, like to come back to your driving comment, a lot of countries drive on one side of the road, a lot of countries drive on the other side of the road, and I spent some time in Cambodia, and there's no rules.
Man,
when I was in Cambodia,
when were you in
Cambodia?
I didn't know you went to Cambodia. How long were you in Cambodia?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Went to Phnom Penh and stuff. Yeah, it was really neat. But the roads there were crazy, right? If people just drove wherever, whatever, however, I couldn't tell what the rules were. And thankfully, I didn't have to drive, right? I was just in the back of a truck. So it's one of those things. But so having people get together and say, hey, these are the standards. And back when I was doing my podcast back in 2006, there was no standards because there was nothing. My first web search had 126 hits on podcast when I did my Google search. So there's slightly more than that now.
Slightly.
Okay, I'm going to jump to my third reference to McCarran and Yamanaka, The Power of the Microphone, podcasting as an effective instructional tool for educational or leadership education. And it's a way to engage people that benefits them somehow, right? If you have good content and you give them the opportunity to engage with it in a pile of different ways, perfect. As they see the win, they'll make the time, they'll make the effort. And that's what I think we're doing here, because we do get some feedback here and there saying, oh yeah, I like this, or what do you think of that? Or how about whatever? And
it's been noted that the sound quality has been lacking. So, there are things that I can do within Camtasia and actually perhaps stepping into, better or higher, more specialized audio program, easily usable stuff. But before that, one of the things that I thought, could just stand for being remedied is using a different platform other than Skype, because Skype has been convenient, obviously, but it's really designed as enterprise level web conferencing, more or less for meetings of a standard kind of nature. and use within the wider friggin' Microsoft ecosystem of apps, right? Which I spend a lot of time with in my work environment. We all do. So now StreamYard is, something that is being sort of like it's lots of people have been using it. It's a very mainstream, specifically for podcasting. And what I'm noticing, at least thus far, is that it makes better, more efficient demands of your bandwidth, of your internet bandwidth. So like I'm in a lower quality environment or lower power environment for that lately. So it sort of does its buffering and other stuff, which is sort of makes use of a limited connection to a better standard, suitable for publishing or whatnot. So yeah, it's
So that's a win, because when you go back to UDL, not everybody has like wicked fast internet connections. They just
exactly.
don't.
So if you can make use of what you have, even if it's like a limited, even if you were like, you had an analog tape recorder, and you just recorded yourself, you should be able to put that in a FedEx envelope or, from like some little outpost in northern wherever in Canada and have it, over to Thunder Bay to the guy with the, just, you should be able to make it that easily, right? Or with that much difficulty, as the case may be.
Yeah. So what's nice is, because we both have permanent degrees in the field, we're not scared of the technology. Like for me, I always blame the technology, because I know enough. If something's not working, it's a poor user interface or it's a poor design, because I've been around enough to know how things normally work. And I put my time in to learn. I've done that 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. You know, the 10,000 hours.
Yeah. Or no, that's not Blake. It's what's the 10,000 hours? What's the book
it was
about?
Malcolm Gladwell, one of his books.
Yes, it's like I know which book you're. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna.
Yeah, it was a white cover. It was a very interesting font on the top. I've read a bunch of his books. I can't remember which one.
The Tipping Point. Is it?
Was it?
Yes. I'm 80% sure the book in question is The Tipping Point. That's like the level of expertise that's needed to sort of, at an individual level, kind of put you at another level beyond, whatever, without separating the expert from the non-expert, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. So now I have some questions for you. I'm going to be the host and ask you some questions.
Sure.
When it comes to the music, because every episode you choose different music. How do you do that? What goes through your mind? Or what's your process?
Okay, so first of all, I appreciate that you basically give me license without any parameters on it. You just go, okay, so whatever you think, which is fine. I'll just say it's an intuitive process. But what I would say with that is, first of all, there's two aspects of the music that we would be referring to here. So first of which is, I think, the theming of the episode, having the name for the episode come from a music clip, a song usually by lately, more often than not, an alternative or whatever kind of music artist. And sometimes there's a visual there, and then other times it's just a static image of the song or the CD cover or whatever. But I would just say in terms of that, it's really just like my English kind of teacher / writer, whatever brain is always kind of looking at things as, what's the theme here? What's the narrative? And that's kind of how I, move through life in a lot of different ways. And it's just like, okay, so, so we're talking about how far we've come, right? So for this episode, so to me, I think, that's sort of, there's something you could say to there. There's a certain amount of what's it actually like versus what do I think it's like. And that would speak to a thing of metacognition, which we talk about a lot. And then that would also speak to acting, right? So Shakespeare, he has the some of his comedies, like, you know, Midsummer Night's Dream, you know, it features very prominently a play within a play, right? So there's drama within a larger drama. So this is just something that's kind of hardwired into the narrative psyche of our collective, you know, thing as people of a certain cultural whatever constituency. And I just kind of like, okay, so, and then I have my ridiculous, voluminous hobby of music, and I get to insert that prominently into this. Now, in terms of the other aspect of it, just I'll say, got a lot of respect for Pixabay, the Pixabay repository of music. So when you choose like a part for the intro music and then, you know, chunk it throughout and then at the very end finish it up, that's just literally, you can go into the repository and the pixabay.com, I think, /music, and it's all copyright, openly licensed. You can be a nice person and attribute it, or you can be just someone who's lazy and not attribute it, which is me, which now that I think about it, I should put an explicit attribution for all media used to exemplify good practice. I didn't really think of that, Ted, you know, explicitly until just now. So Doug, thanks for the opportunity. And I'm going to go less long-winded on the next question.
No, that's fine. Do you have some of the thematic stuff done beforehand, or are you taking inspiration from the conversation that we have and doing that afterwards?
I really look at it from the title of your topic and try to get something distinct as a piece that stands up equally to other elements within the media conversation. So as a functional element, it sort of carries its own weight, you know? So it's sort of in keeping with your UDL thing. So if you were to, you know, say, mute the entire conversation, but have, say, you know, like subtitles up, if which we don't do because I'm lazy, but you could easily switch that in with the YouTube. And then say you wanted to hear the conversation and watch the visual, right? That the visual would be somewhat interesting. Or so like that. So that's kind of what I have in mind when I'm trying to grab those images, right, from Unsplash, those Unsplash photographs, which is another good website. So then similarly, if you want to just skip the musical part, you could. And again, I could probably enhance the technical aspect of it as a media interface by just having a little digital clickable punch point on it, where you just can just, you know, skip through it if you want to, the equivalent of skip the credits button. But again, it's never been specifically asked of it. So if you're talking to UDL, it's like, well, it should be explicitly there just as a matter of good practice. And so for me, this is like, okay, I've got a need for UDL potentially for the stuff that I'm doing at work. And now I will hopefully be able to apply that investigation somewhat into what we're doing on this episode, this podcast. And then I guess, suppose, you know, in theory, to the, you know, music one. And then there may be some potential of doing a work-based one on the security kind of space, which I'll speak no more of other than to mention it there. And I will not go into it further on a tangent like I did on the aborted recording. Aborted. It wasn't aborted. It was scuppered. It's going to be a lot of stuff reused for that. But anyway, so does that answer your question?
Scuppered's good. Yeah, it does. It does. Because scuppered is a word that we'll come back to when we in December.
We're a maritimer thing. It's scuppering. What? Okay, for the uninitiated, Doug, what's your definition of scuppering? What's your ad-lib definition of scuppering?
Scuppering is abandoned ship, right? It's grab what you can and get off the sinking boat. I don't know if that's the actual definition, but that's...
Set yourself free by leaving unhelpful desires and situations. Is that something you could transpose onto that, potentially?
Yeah, that would work too. That's more stoic than mine.
I'm just like, is there a positive extrapolation of this? You know, it's like to say, certainly from moments of crisis, you know, but and here's my chance to throw out to Epictetus. This is my I'm making my way through the Epictetus discourses, like as opposed to like the handbook. So the discourses is sort of the handbook copied assiduously. He didn't actually write this himself, but because just writing it fell outside of his practical application, which meant teaching it verbally. But he had a very, very assiduous pupil sitting there by ear, it sounds like, within very close physical proximity, literally writing it down word for word in the moment. So it's got this verbal aspect to it. You can even tell through translation from like the colloquial Greek that it's coming from, because this has been translated by a PhD in the language and in literature. And yeah, it's kind of like embrace the moment of having nothing except your will, as if that's all that you own, if that's unencumbered, then you own the world, right? Because everything else is more or less outside of your control, and therefore not subject to any concern effectively. So
Who had the quote? It was from the 40s, I think. It was first you own your possessions, then your possessions own you.
that's right. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know the that might be something where if we just look that up, we could attribute it accordingly. But that's exactly exactly the thought there. Kind of. I don't know. This is like the very last thing I'll say about this for now. For now is that's like I've decided for that particular book, I'm only reading it when I'm taking the bus to or from work. It's like this is my city of transit, city of St. John public transit, and it's actually quite leisurely, because actually St. John Transit is rad, and St. John is just big enough to be able to have like a kind of slightly larger city vibe, but I can still get to work in like less than 30 minutes using public transit. From when I step out of my front door to when I'm walking into my office, it's like less than a 35-minute thing. So to me, that's better than I've had in Ontario. That's better than I've had lots of places, right? Qatar, that was always some variety of an adventure, so yeah, it's a good time. It's a good way to get up on the Epictetus. It's so good stuff, man. So
what I'm hoping for now is if we can just talk about, you talked about the software and stuff. So
sure.
I appreciate that. But your technology setup, because I moved across a room. Like I used to face that wall. Now I face this wall. And
those are major changes.
You've recorded from at least 4 different places. Is that right? Like
transition-induced physical reconfigurations pretty much for every episode since the one that we did in mid-June, right before I made my decision to move across the country and back and forth across the country, 5 times in 7 weeks, which has been spoken to. I'm still just like, did that really happen? That must have happened. I guess that happened. Yeah, anyway. And now here we are in the year anniversary, just to reiterate to sort of circle back to what Doug kind of put on us here for this episode. It's like, now we're trying a completely new format, sort of concurrent with the 1 year here. Moving from something that we've used for all the episodes, being the Skype plus video, to now like that seems to be less functionally appropriate. So now we, because of that necessity, we move into something. It's not like we were like, oh, we got to try StreamYard because everybody says it's cool. It's just more like out of functional necessity, we move from something that just was optimal and it's what we needed it for, to now something where. And I'm already noticing some other kind of cooler sort of side functionality or features about this, even just as we're using it now. So I would just say to anybody, let necessity lead to your use of this stuff rather than sort of trying to use the stuff for its own sake, or in the teaching vernacular, pedagogy before technology, which was something that kind of landed with us in our cohort when we began the doctoral level kind of journey with this stuff. So,
yeah. And when you started, your tech setup was different, though.
oh yeah,
You've got a new
to get to the
computer,
practical
a new
question that
mic,
you
and
actually asked, yeah, it's a what
yeah,
I find optimal is a desktop computer. Desktop computer is perfect. What I should be using is a hardwired internet connection, but I'm too lazy. I'm too lazy to make the connection that way, so I'm using wireless pretty much everywhere I go. Although when I actually own property again of my own, I'll be more incentivized to change the physical friggin' connection, in that way. I'll be able to control. Yeah. Anyway, it's so in the present sense, friggin' having a desktop computer with lots of free memory, lots of available media is kind of optimal for making use of what bandwidth I have. And one thing that's kind of come out of this is I've actually moved from using a podcast, quote unquote, specific microphone, which I still have, but I'm using a camera now, a pretty okay, I think it's HD camera for webcam with a microphone in it. So again, kind of streamlining things a bit. It just plugs in as a USB. And then in terms of the production process, using Camtasia, TechSmith and Camtasia, very entry level, but also very potentially versatile, certainly for any basic necessity in terms of taking audio files, MP4s and MP3s and whatever. Unless you're trying to do something really at a high level to a very like industry kind of standard thing where you need to have very high level production values on certain aspects. This is sort of like it'll produce a professional, functional multimedia product with the ability to upload it somewhere else, and then potentially say add H5P interactions to it or whatnot, because it'll be exported as just an MP4. So hence why we put it up on YouTube, multiple formats, multiple potential user groups that way. And you can just export the sound as an MP3. And again, you just upload it on a WordPress site, and then suddenly it has its own specific hyperlink associated with just the upload. And so again, even if that was all that you had, just one hyperlink associated with the individual object, that could be a way of enjoying or taking in the thing at your own way, right? So I think, as to Doug, what you were saying earlier, there's just a lot of stuff that because of the way that we're doing this, there's a lot of little individual points that you can extrapolate. You could even export just a written transcript of this, and somebody could just read the transcript, right, as a written standalone piece if they wanted to. That would not be it would not be hard to do, to generate that transcript, say from the YouTube, because I mean that's Google, and I'm sure they're AI enhanced, no doubt. And this is one of the things that makes me interested in AI. It's like, because like Google Translate and those kind of have always been notoriously awkward or bad. And so, but if you have something like with the dynamic capability of AI, sort of piped into that as, somehow I just sort of think, maybe that's the sauce that could, potentially add into enhancements within something like that. Do you know what I mean there, pal? Does that sound reasonable?
That's a nice look to the future. Maybe that's a thing we do, because that technology is maturing enough to the point where the user interfaces and the value of it are getting to where we might want to use it. And then maybe not too. Maybe it's like, nah, we don't need it.
Well,
now,
you mentioned at one point on one of these episodes. Oh, sorry.
No. It's just, for me, I made a joke about just moving across the room. I've only had the one residence since then. I have had 6 different audio setups since this time last year, trying to find something that works. And I had an old microphone, and apparently these earbuds have microphones built in that are rubbish, and I have a headset with a microphone, and so I've had 6 different settings, and I finally got comfortable
You
in
got
like
your
May.
optimal setup now, right? Is that the case?
Yeah, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And then I had to move something else in my room here, and then I had to move it all from one side of my desk to the other side of the desk. And I know that's very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Have you read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? You
We've
know
had this
Zapwood Beetlebrox?
conversation on this podcast, I think, more than once, and
I'll repeat it for posterity if need be again, but I'll say I respect it immensely. I even recognize some of the things from it. I didn't consume it, as a book in such a way that people do who kind of rave about it as a thing. But I recognize it as a thing and its value. Not unlike my attitude towards Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, or a few other kind of things. Like, I respect it for what it is. I really do. I just never kind of took it in.
So there's a character in that called Zapwood Beetlebrox, and he had
Okay.
2 mouths. And what they would do was a radio joke. He would sit on one side of the mic to record, and then he'd just move his head to the other side of the mic, and that was the other mouth. And so
That
you couldn't see it; it
prankster.
was invisible. But it was a 1970s radio joke, is all it is. So it made me feel like that, having to move my equipment from one side to the other, even though nobody else would notice that.
you were shifting around behind the scenes. You were the radio host that nobody knew. You were kind of moving and maneuvering. My representation remains persistent, and yet my manifestation behind that is dynamic and unique.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I wonder. And again, I'm not actually, contrary to what you may ascertain from my background, I'm not sitting in a friggin' smoke-induced, digital kind of holding environment. I'm actually at a location as undisclosed, and by undisclosed, I mean in the front room of my apartment. And I was almost going to just try flicking into another background right now, but I don't want to. I feel like we're having success with the format right now, and I don't want to jinx it by trying to try some unfamiliar feature in the middle of the thing. Always a recipe for nope, just don't do it at a practical level unless you want to add 20 minutes to your thing. Just don't do it. Don't try the extra stuff. That's
yeah, but even with that, you've already tried the extra stuff because Skype, the old software, didn't have that functionality that we used. And now this
it may well have had it, but my thing, I guess, with a lot of Microsoft-based stuff is I really have no interest in exploring their stuff further. I guess there's one thing that I've been kind of I can sort of mention from my professional that kind of keeps cropping up. I've been taking these courses, just to sort of experiment with online course delivery in kind of certain specific ways. And one of the things from it is like, it keeps coming up as Pareto's principle. Do you know about Pareto's principle of economics? Doug, have you heard of this?
I've heard of it, but that was a long time ago.
Well, only to the extent that it's a really neat kind of syllogism or whatever, which I think has other kind of applications. It's like through functional practical testing in his area, he sort of found, we're talking like, I guess, 1930s-ish Italian economist. I don't know where that puts him historically, contextually relative to fascism and pre-World War II and whatever, but but one thing he kind of observed through his work or whatever, his research, was that 80% of the value of your work comes from 20% of what you actually do. So you can apply this to like on a computer system, right? Like 80% of what people use of your system comes from 20% of your features. So with Microsoft, I was just so underwhelmed by their overall interface and presentation. It's like, I don't have the interest to try your background widget. Thanks. I kind of resent that I have to just kind of, it's like I don't resent it. It's just it was so underwhelming. It didn't want me to. I just felt no inclination to try any of the features beyond what we were using just to kind of get it live. And one thing with this StreamYard thingy is, besides the fact that I see StreamYard in my friggin' Facebook feed every time now I log on, and so does Dan, my podcast friend, the music one we just recorded. He's like, "Yep, I see it in my Facebook feed all the time since we mentioned it on Facebook chat, basically." So you're not seeing that. You're not seeing StreamYard in your Facebook chat, are you, or your Facebook feed? Are you, Doug?
I haven't been on much, but I'm betting that if I go on tonight or tomorrow, that's it'll be there.
100%, 100%. And I'm just like, yeah, I clicked on all those friggin' user agreements, so that's what's happening. It's like, okay. Anyway, man.
Okay.
So
I have one last thing.
30-minute point here. So sure, yeah.
Yeah, my one last thing is about the distribution of the files, because when we started, the distribution was uploaded to your YouTube channel and linked to the WordPress site.
Correct.
And so can you give us 30 seconds?
Would you like the technical breakdown of what that involves? Sure. So
yeah, like just a quick and dirty.
Totally, man. So what I'm going to do with this particular episode, this episode 33, we're transitioning the format and also celebrating a year of emerging formats, which is kind of cool in its own way. We're gonna stop the recording, and then I'm gonna go to see a concert at the 506 Container Village. I'm gonna go see Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo and his sons play at Container Village, and it's gonna be cool. Yeah, I got free tickets just today. My uncle and my aunt can't go, so shout out to Uncle Corey and Aunt Jode for those. And then when I get back, I might, or tomorrow, whatever, for sure by tomorrow, I'll download the file of this video from the thing into just a local MP4 file, just as it is. And my intention then is that I will put it into Camtasia. I will put it into Camtasia as an MP4, and then I'll also take my downloaded my image files, my JPEGs, my PNG files that I've taken from my visual thing, unsplash.com, where they give you really beautiful professional level photography for free of charge. And again, I realize now that we're having this conversation, Doug, if I don't do it for this episode, please, you got to be persistent and actually remind me. I'm giving you a bit of homework here, that as part of our format, I really do actually have to have a slide that actually says on it everybody that has a photograph, because you can shout them out on social media, but I just friggin' hate Twitter /X or whatever, so I don't do it. But it's really, if I'm saying good practices vis-a-vis OER, that is something we should be doing. So I'll try and get to that with this production, starting with this episode. But anyway, take those friggin' images, also place them into Camtasia, and then I go to pixabay.com, their music, which I think we talked about earlier this episode.
Yep.
I think a bit. Thank you. It's been 52 minutes of combo so far, and counting. So then I just take the music. One clip, typically 2.5 minutes is what I'm looking for. Drop that in, download it to my machine, MP3, download it, put it in again. So just the sort of drop interface, the Dropbox-ish interface on the Camtasia. And then I just kind of begin sequencing it in. So I also have our land acknowledgement files, which I also put in there. I put in a slide deck, right? So I take the PowerPoint slides, which give attribution where the acknowledgement, the written version of that, and then the title slide, the episode name, whatever. So I just put a little slide deck together and then drop the PowerPoint file again into the sort of media bin, if you will, in the Camtasia interface. So this is why I'm saying Camtasia is kind of the thing that kind of just renders it from being static stuff into, there's easier ways to do it. I could just, load up a slide deck and whatever. I could just put the stuff out there as separate files, but that wouldn't really serve the purpose of user friendliness in terms of consumption whatsoever. So Camtasia is kind of, it's easy to get to. You can get on a trial basis. It's inexpensive if you want to just buy it for a year and just get a license for it. It produces an industry level standard MP4 video, right? So in the interest of making this widely usable, so you just hit export once you're all done all your customizing. To throw in all your stuff and kind of sequence it out, and you layer the music over the images and whatever. And I admit I could be doing a much better job in terms of giving it a professional sound, certainly, which has been pointed out, and it's something to work on for sure. Shout out to anybody who cares enough to make that comment. And to be fair, that's something we can definitely do. At this point, though, what we're doing is we're doing things optimally. And I mentioned this on the other podcast. If you want to spend exactly $0 to produce something, this is as good as you can get, really. And if you want to upgrade that in terms of enhanced internet connections or really specific, improved, microphone systems, cameras, digital software. One thing that I've kind of been sort of tangibly thinking about lately is maybe getting certified or just getting some kind of use as like Adobe Creative Cloud, with their digital, with their video stuff. Because if you look at media design job app, things, and I'm not trying to change jobs, but in terms of producing a lot of web-based content that is of a certain, shall we say, production standard or whatnot, it seems that the Adobe, cloud-based products are considered kind of higher level, Dreamweaver and, so, as opposed to just, well, I shot this with my screen capture thing and then rendered it as an MP4. So we're talking about an educational thing. We're using tools and processes that are readily at hand, user-friendly, including you sending me the docs thing, which is great. I just take my email, I open up your docs that you throw there, and I'm like, great, I can just copy this out, paste it into the WordPress, so then we have a video that lives on its own link, which has audio there if you want it, and all the powers of YouTube behind it. And then we also have just its own separate little audio thing because Camtasia will put out the MP3 video, right? Yeah, man. Did I? So then
that sounds very
encyclopedic. The YouTube clip gets created with its own link. I embed it into the WordPress, and then there's a plugin, a very I want to say it's Blueberry. There's a plugin, and I can't. I'm too kind of at the end of my tether at this point to say specifically what it is, but it'll be in the notes or not. But that's what it operates in the back of the WordPress site, wherein it gets it out to Spotify. So all I have to do is kind of have an extra field at the bottom of the WordPress post, and then put in the title, upload a custom picture for it as a thing that goes out with the metadata for Spotify, Apple Music, Google Music, whatever. I haven't been told it's inaccessible off any of those platforms, but I have no usage of it from that perspective myself. So unless somebody tells me they can't get to it or it's not there, I'm just going to assume that it is. And that's, again, just having it layered into the WordPress post kind of, very easy to use. I mean, I could do an instructional video that would be probably okay about just how to do that. Very straightforward. I mean, there's already tons of videos about that, but
you're making it sound easy.
It's very easy. It's very easy. And I'm realizing now, Doug, I'm due to get to that concert here pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to kind of wind my part of this down, except to say thanks for the topic. I think we had a good opportunity here for a redo. I think the choice of switching out to StreamYard has been beneficial, if I haven't said that already. Anything else you want to add here before we sign her off there, Doug?
Other than have a nice time at the concert, and I'll talk to you later.
Okie doke. Take care. Enjoy your respective weeks, everybody, and we'll see you again relatively soon.